For this Going Deeper, we're looking at noun phrases. I've taken an article from the Open Access Government UK website on the topic of deception during election time in the UK. So I'm writing this particular lesson as the UK is facing a general election to decide the next Prime Minister. So this is a topical issue at the time of writing. So let's explore what it says here. Across party lines, there has been a growing reliance on deceptive tactics designed to manipulate public opinion and to secure an advantage in the polls. Let's first of all grammatically identify what's going on here. The first part, across party lines, this is an adverbial phrase which gives us more information about the rest of the sentence, basically saying what we're going to read about applies to all political parties in the UK. Then we have the simple elements of the phrase. There is the subject. Has been. This is really the verb to be in the present perfect form. There, of course, we use as a kind of a dummy subject when we're saying something exists. So really subject-verb here is really saying the next thing we're going to say exists. And then we get to the noun phrase. And you can, let's start by finding the main noun here. The main noun is reliance, and I'll explain how we know that in a moment. Let me underline the rest of the noun phrase here. So it's a long noun phrase. So this is an example of a really long noun phrase that's used in writing in English, and it just underlines the reason why you need to be confident in dealing with noun phrases in order to understand long texts accurately. There's two sides to this noun phrase. Instead of using an underline, I'm going to use colours just to bring out the different parts. So let's, first of all, we have the article, which I'm going to put in blue. And then the adjective, which I'm going to put in a kind of a red colour here. So let's just to make them stand out, we'll just make them go bold. So a growing reliance. So growing is an adjective, but it's actually the participle of the verb grow. So sometimes we can turn the verb into a participle to make it an adjective to describe the noun. A growing reliance. So here the adjective is trying to describe a situation where there is a trend. We have a reliance and there's a trend towards this reliance. This reliance is going up and up and up and up and up. And a growing reliance is telling us that this is just a general situation. The growing reliance would have made it be specific to one event, but it's one growing reliance that there could be out of many reliances. Reliance, of course, means it comes from the verb to rely, and so here it's the mental idea that you rely on something. Reliance. Now on to the second part. So I'm going to highlight the first bit of the after the second part in. Let's go for green this time. Again, I'm going to make that bold just to make it stand out. So there has been a growing reliance on deceptive tactics. So the word reliance on its own doesn't really have much information for us. If you rely on something, you want to know, well, what are you relying on? So on is the preposition that often collocates with the word rely on, and reliance has the same. So really, after the main noun reliance, we want to know more about what this reliance is. So we're going to start to unpack it here afterwards. So the way to unpack the meaning of reliance is to use certain types of phrases or clauses afterwards. And one of the grammatical phrases we're allowed to use is a preposition phrase. So here we have on, which is a preposition. And then the noun tactics, deceptive, gives us more information about the tactics. So there's a reliance on tactics, and these tactics are deceptive. However, the noun phrase is not finished there. Next, we have some more information about the effect of these deceptive tactics. So let's find another colour for this. Let's go for an orange colour. And again, I'll put that in bold just so that we're absolutely clear. And here we have the verb, the past participle designed. This is really short for which are, but we have omitted which are here. Really what we have here is a reduced relative clause. It should be which are designed to manipulate public opinion. But because tactics has the same, is described by the relative clause that follows, we can remove the words which are. We can omit it. The rules allow us to do that. So that's what should be there. I'll leave it in brackets there just so we have our idea of what this means. But the purpose here is that we can add relative clauses after the main noun reliance. But there's no real order to how preposition phrases and relative clauses work afterwards. But I should add something here. This relative clause is not affecting the word reliance. It's affecting the noun immediately before it, which is tactics. So the tactics are designed to manipulate public opinion. So you can see there's a bit of a chain growing here. We have the noun reliance. Reliance on what? Tactics. Tactics which are designed for which reason? To manipulate public opinion. So there's like a chain going on. The preposition phrase, first of all, modifies the reliance, and then the relative clause modifies the word that comes before. Relative clauses have to modify the word that comes before. Preposition phrases don't have to. There can be a chain of 2, 3, 4, 5 preposition phrases which all modify the main noun. So, for example, we may come to an example later on in this piece, but let's come up with an example. There is an election happening in June in the UK at election stations, and so on and so on. Now, each of these preposition phrases, in June in the UK at election stations, all those 3 preposition phrases all modify the word election. They don't modify the word that came before. So with preposition phrases, if they're all one after the other, they will modify the main noun. But here, the relative clause modifies the noun beforehand. So because there's a noun in the preposition phrase, the relative clause modifies that. If the preposition phrase wasn't there, then the relative clause would modify the noun that came previous, which was a reliance. Let's move on. Well, we have an and here. So what this means is we actually have a double, kind of like a double object here, designed to, let's put them all in the same colour. So deceptive tactics, which are designed, so that's the verb there, designed for what purpose? To manipulate public opinion and secure an advantage in the poll. So those 2 phrases there are a list. They're mirrored. They're mirrored sort of mini infinitive clauses that take the position after the verb here. So they have equal status, and tells us that they have equal status, which are designed. Why are they designed? To manipulate public opinion and secure an advantage in the polls. So they really have adverb quality. They're in the object position, but they're not objects. They have adverb quality because they're telling us why they are designed. They are designed for this reason: to manipulate public opinion and secure advantage in the polls. So they're describing the word designed. In fact, you could point out here that we have the preposition to, and to introduces a phrase which relates to the verb that comes before it. Designed for this purpose: manipulate public opinion and secure an advantage in the polls. Just before we leave this one, I'm just going to colour this in green here just to make it really clear. In, of course, is another preposition, but by this time the chain has been broken between reliance and this particular preposition. For prepositions to all relate to the same noun, they all need to be in a row. But this has been broken by the relative clause. So now this preposition in cannot refer back to reliance. Now you have to go to the next noun back. So advantage is being described by in the polls. Okay, that was quite a lengthy look at that noun phrase. Let's move on to another one. So let's go into the next sentence. Here, Alistair McCarpra, CEO of the Chartered Institute Public Relations, explores political deception further. It is an approach we have already seen in the recent local elections. So here we have a complement phrase, which I'm going to highlight here. In fact, let's analyse the whole of this sentence so we have a sense of what's going on here. So it's a bit like there is a bit of a dummy subject, meaning that we're referring back to something, or perhaps referring forward. Here it is referring back to the concept of political deception, which was introduced in the previous paragraph. So that's the subject. Then we have the verb is, and then an approach is the noun. And again, we've got something potentially missing here, and that's the word that. It is an approach that. So here, that introduces a clause which is going to modify the noun before it. We would probably tend to call this a noun clause. It is an approach that, and then the information afterwards. We have already seen in the recent local elections. In reality, there are two grammatical ways of looking at this. The terminology is not too important. What's important is to know how the phrase is constructed. We could say this. We could say it is an approach that we have already seen in recent local elections, meaning a noun phrase starting with approach followed by a relative clause, because we could have updated this to be approach which we have already seen in the recent local elections. So we could call it a noun phrase starting with approach, or we could treat approach as being an individual noun followed by a noun clause. And the noun clause is the clause that follows that. It doesn't really matter what terminology you call it. What's important is to know the rules that you can apply to make the sentence. So we have an approach, the noun, and then we want to know more about what this approach is. And that is where this extra clause comes in. we have already seen in the recent local elections. Imagine it being two sentences. It is an approach. And then we have already seen this approach in the recent local elections. So that's where the word approach would fit in to the second clause. It would fit in the object position. It is an approach we have already seen in the recent local elections. We have already seen this approach in the recent local elections would also be absolutely fine. In fact, if we said that, it would have negated the need for the start of the sentence. We could have just started with, we have already seen this approach in the recent local elections. But of course, being journalists, they wanted to emphasize particular words, and they want to keep the approach at the beginning because that refers to the topic of the whole article, which is deception, because the approach is deception. So let's study it grammatically. An approach, main noun. Un tells us it's something general, not specific to any situation. We have already seen. So we means us, of course, and already seen is referring back to the past in a situation that happened in the past related to now. And then where did we already see it? That's where the in part comes in. So in introduces a preposition phrase that's going to tell us where we saw it, and that is in the recent local elections. So I'll stop there with this particular analysis, but I hope this underlines the fact that in the real world of English, the noun phrase actually dominates when it comes to formal writing. When you really analyse English writing, the subject and the verb take a very small amount of space in the text, but the noun phrase takes most of the space. The noun phrase then can embed further features of subjects and verbs, but you've got to know how to spot them. And the general principle is if you have a noun, think about how you get to the next part. If it's noun followed by a verb with tense, then that noun's probably the subject. If it's a noun followed by other language, such as a preposition, or maybe another subject, or a participle of the verb, basically a verb that doesn't show time, then that's going to be a longer noun phrase with clauses embedded in it, or a preposition phrase embedded in it. And that will really help you with your reading when you can identify features like this easily.